I couldn't believe my eyes when I discovered the HOA had secretly built a massive train tunnel beneath my backyard. But their illegal scheme turned into my multi-million-dollar windfall. How would you react if you found out someone was trespassing under your home and it ended up making you rich? My coffee cup slid across the kitchen table without anyone touching it. That's when I knew something strange was happening in my house. Did you feel that? I asked my dog Buddy, who lifted his head with his ears perked. For 3 weeks straight, the strange vibrations kept waking me up at night. Picture frames tilted sideways. The chandelier swung back and forth. At first, I thought maybe we were having small earthquakes, but nobody else on my street seemed to notice. I've lived in my Maplewood Estates home in Dallas, Texas for 15 years. It's my dream place, with a big backyard where Buddy can run free. I saved for a decade to buy it. So when things started breaking because of those mystery tremors, I got worried. "Your pipes might be making those noises," said my neighbor Chris when I mentioned it while grabbing the mail. "Old houses make weird sounds." But my house wasn't old, and these weren't normal sounds. Last Tuesday, the shaking got so bad a crack spread across my bedroom wall. That's when I called Margaret Collins, our HOA president. "I think something's seriously wrong underground," I told her over the phone. "It's causing damage to my house." "You're just imagining things," Margaret replied in a bored tone, like she was filing her nails while talking. "Maybe check your foundation. Old houses settle." "My house is only 15 years old," I said, "and the shaking happens at specific times, like it's on a schedule." "Well, I can't help you. The HOA doesn't deal with personal home issues." But later that day, I noticed something odd. Margaret's sleek black SUV drove slowly past my house, then stopped at the corner. She seemed to be taking pictures of my property with her phone before speeding off. That night, the worst shaking yet woke me at exactly 11:30 p.m. My nightstand lamp toppled to the floor. When I went downstairs for water, I swear I could hear a low rumbling beneath my feet. The next morning, I called a professional, David Foster, a geologist, to check what was happening underground. "I've been doing this for 30 years, David said after using special equipment in my yard. "And I can tell you right now, something big is moving under your property. Not natural, man-made." "Like a broken water main?" I asked. He shook his head. "More like regular vehicle movement, heavy machinery, and it's not deep enough to be city subway lines." I paid David extra to bring ground scanning equipment. The next day, the images showed a massive tunnel, perfectly round, newly built, running directly beneath my backyard and extending beyond my property line on both sides. "This is professional construction," David whispered, looking uneasy. "And it's recent. Someone spent millions building this." My hands shook as I called my friend Anthony, a real estate lawyer. "They can't just build under your property," Anthony said after looking at the scans. "You own the land beneath your house all the way down to the center of the earth, legally speaking." That weekend, I rented a mini excavator and started digging in the far corner of my backyard. Just 3 feet down, I hit smooth, curved concrete. With Chris's help, we cleared enough dirt to reveal what looked like the top of a massive tunnel, big enough for a train. "Who would build this?" Chris asked, his face pale with shock. "And why didn't they tell any of us?" Just then, my phone rang. It was Margaret. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "You need HOA permission before doing any excavation." I looked up and saw her standing at my fence line, phone in hand, face twisted with anger. "Funny," I replied. "I was about to ask you the same about this tunnel under my house." Her face changed instantly, first shocked, then calculating. "That's city infrastructure," she said quickly. "Nothing to do with the HOA." "Then why are you here yelling at me for digging in my own yard?" Margaret straightened her designer jacket. "There's an emergency HOA meeting tomorrow night. I expect you to fill in that hole immediately and attend the meeting if you have concerns." After she left, Chris helped me uncover more of the tunnel. That's when we found something strange. A small metal door with the Maplewood Estates HOA logo engraved on it. This wasn't city infrastructure at all. Our HOA had built a secret tunnel under my house. That night, another rumble woke me up, but this time I knew what it was. I pressed my ear to the basement floor and heard it clearly, the unmistakable sound of a train moving below. Someone had built an entire underground railway beneath my property, without telling me, without permission, without compensation. And I was pretty sure I knew why Margaret Collins was suddenly very interested in what I was digging up in my backyard.
The next evening, as I walked into the crowded HOA emergency meeting, every head turned my way. Margaret sat at the center of the board table, her face calm, but her knuckles white as she gripped her gavel. What she didn't know was that I had brought David's ground scanning images, property boundary maps, and a voice recorder. If the HOA thought they could dig under my home and get away with it, they were about to learn who they were really dealing with. Could I have everyone's attention? Margaret tapped her microphone at the front of the Maplewood Estates Community Center. Every seat was filled with neighbors, all whispering about why they'd been called to an emergency meeting. I sat in the back row, David's tunnel images in a folder on my lap. My hands were sweaty, but my mind was clear. Margaret smiled, flashing her perfect white teeth. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice. It seems we have a situation with one of our homeowners." All eyes turned to me as Margaret pointed. "Mr. Carter has been conducting unauthorized excavation on his property, potentially endangering community infrastructure." I stood up. "Is that what we're calling it? Community infrastructure? That's a funny name for a secret train tunnel you built under my house without permission." The room erupted. People jumped up, shouting questions. Margaret banged her gavel over and over. "Please, everyone, calm down," she yelled. "This is a simple misunderstanding." "Show them the pictures," I said. Her face tightened. "That won't be necessary. The board can handle this privately." "I think my neighbors deserve to know what's happening under their homes," I replied, walking to the front. I handed my folder to Chris, who began passing the images around. "These scans show a massive tunnel running beneath my property. It wasn't there when I bought my house." Margaret's ever-present assistant, Linda Harper, jumped up. "This was a community improvement project. The tunnel connects our neighborhood directly to downtown Dallas. It's for everyone's benefit." "On my property," I said firmly, holding up my deed and property map. "Without my permission or knowledge." The room went silent. People looked back and forth between me and Margaret. "It was an oversight," Margaret finally said, her voice smooth as butter. "We assumed standard easement rights covered underground development." I laughed. "Show me where in my deed it says you can build train tracks under my living room." Margaret's perfect smile disappeared. "We've already invested $2.3 million in this project. The tunnel opens next month." "Not if it's using my land illegally," I replied. Linda stepped forward. "The board voted unanimously on this project 2 years ago. It's in the meeting minutes." "I never received notice of any vote about my property," I said. An older resident raised his hand. "I don't remember voting on a tunnel either. Where did the money come from?" Margaret cleared her throat. "The specific details were kept confidential for security reasons, but I assure you all proper procedures were followed." "Then you won't mind showing us the permits from the city?" I asked. "And the environmental impact studies? And the notices you sent to affected homeowners?" Margaret's eyes narrowed. "This meeting is about your unauthorized digging, Mr. Carter, not about HOA business practices." An argument broke out across the room. Some neighbors supported the idea of a private tunnel to downtown. Others were furious they hadn't been told. "How much will it cost to use this tunnel?" someone asked. Linda answered quickly. "It's included in your HOA fees." "Of course. That's not what I heard," I said loudly. "Chris, tell them what you found out." Chris stood nervously. "I was at the clubhouse last week when Margaret was meeting with some homeowners from Oakwood Drive. They were talking about different membership tiers for tunnel access. Premium packages started at $500 per month." The room erupted again. "That's a lie," Margaret shouted. "The tunnel is for everyone." "Then why were you collecting special fees?" asked Mrs. Harris from 2 streets over. Margaret slammed her gavel. "This meeting is adjourned. The board will address individual concerns by appointment only." As people filed out, angry and confused, Chris caught up with me. "Be careful," he whispered. "I saw Linda taking pictures of your house this morning. They're planning something." That night, my doorbell rang at 9 p.m. A man in a business suit stood there holding a folder. "Mr. Carter, I'm Thomas Wright, attorney for the Maplewood Estates Homeowners Association. I have some documents you need to sign immediately." I didn't invite him in. "What kind of documents?" "Acknowledgement of HOA infrastructure rights. Also a non-disclosure agreement regarding the transportation project." He tried to hand me the folder. "Mrs. Collins said you'd be expecting me." "I'm not signing anything," I replied. His friendly expression vanished. "Then, unfortunately, the association will have to take more formal measures. The board has called a special session to discuss your violations." "What violations?" "Unauthorized excavation, broken community covenants, spreading false information about HOA projects." He smiled coldly. "The fines start at $100 per day, retroactive to when you began digging." After he left, I called Anthony immediately.
"They can't do this," Anthony said after hearing everything. "But they'll make your life miserable trying. Come to my office first thing tomorrow. Bring everything, your deed, property maps, those tunnel images, HOA bylaws, all of it." The next morning, I found an official violation notice stuck to my door. Not one violation, 17. Everything from improper lawn edging to unauthorized pet height. Apparently, Buddy was suddenly 2 inches taller than HOA regulations allowed. When I got into my car to drive to Anthony's office, it wouldn't start. The engine made a horrible grinding noise. I called a tow truck, and the mechanic found the problem immediately. "Someone put sugar in your gas tank," he said. "Destroyed your engine. This was deliberate." While waiting for a rental car, I checked my mailbox. Inside was an envelope with no return address. I opened it to find a single sheet of paper with big, bold letters. "Drop it or lose everything." My hands shook, but not from fear, from anger. The rental car arrived an hour later. As I drove to Anthony's office, I noticed a black SUV trailing me. It stayed 3 cars back, but every turn I made, it matched. When I pulled into the law office parking lot, the SUV crept past slowly. Behind the wheel was Linda Harper. She didn't even try to hide her face. "They're playing hardball," Anthony said after I showed him everything. "But they made one critical mistake." "What's that?" I asked. Anthony grinned. "They never actually filed for underground rights to your property. I checked the county records this morning. According to the law, you own everything from the surface of your land down to the center of the earth." "So what does that mean?" "It means, my friend," Anthony said, leaning forward, "that tunnel they built legally belongs to you. And I think it's time we let them know exactly who they're messing with." The next morning at 6 a.m., my phone buzzed. 27 new emails from the HOA. Each one was a different violation notice. I rubbed my eyes in disbelief. Grass 2 inches too tall, unapproved mailbox color, unauthorized bird feeder. They were throwing everything at me. I hadn't slept well anyway. The rumbling under my house was getting louder. Every few minutes, the coffee in my mug rippled like something out of Jurassic Park. "This is war," I muttered, scrolling through the ridiculous claims. When I stepped outside to grab my newspaper, a bright orange sticker greeted me. "Property in violation." Neighbors peeked through their curtains, whispering. Someone had even taken photos of my house from the street. At work, I couldn't focus. My boss noticed. "Everything okay at home?" she asked. I almost laughed. How could I explain that my homeowners association had secretly built a train tunnel under my property and was now trying to bully me into silence? During lunch, I met with Anthony again. The cafe was packed, perfect for a private conversation. His suit was rumpled as usual, but his eyes sparkled with excitement. "You're not going to believe what I found," he said, sliding a folder across the table. "They diverted over $500,000 from the community pool renovation fund, another $300,000 for road repairs, and get this, Margaret owns 3 companies that received contracts for the tunnel work." "That's illegal," I said, flipping through the paperwork. "Very," Anthony nodded. "But here's the gold mine. They never filed for underground rights to your property. Not with the county, not with the state. According to the law, you own everything from the surface down to the center of the earth." My coffee stopped halfway to my mouth. "You mean the tunnel segment under my land?" "Legally yours," Anthony confirmed. Back at home, a surprise was waiting in my driveway. A large white SUV with HOA security printed on the side, blocking my garage. A man in an ill-fitting uniform stepped out. "Fire hazard inspection," he announced with a smirk. "On whose authority?" I demanded. "HOA emergency powers, Article 8, Section 12. Won't take long, unless you've got something to hide." I knew my rights. You need 48 hours written notice for any inspection. His smile vanished. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Please explain the emergency that justifies this unannounced inspection. He retreated to his vehicle, speaking rapidly into his radio. 10 minutes later, he drove away. But the message was clear. They were watching me. That night was the worst. Every hour on the hour, headlights flooded my bedroom as an HOA patrol car drove by, sirens briefly wailing before going silent. Sleep was impossible. My neighbors must have complained, but nobody dared stand up to Margaret. The next morning, I found my garden destroyed. Plants ripped out, soil scattered across the lawn. The security camera I had installed smashed. Chris, my neighbor from 3 houses down, walked past with his dog. He slowed, staring at the mess. "Did they do this?" he whispered. I nodded. He glanced around nervously. "Margaret's on the warpath. She told everyone at her dinner party last night not to talk to you." "Why is this tunnel so important to her?" I asked. Chris hesitated. "Money. Big money. They're selling premium access packages to certain residents. $15,000 for a private entrance key? $25,000 for guaranteed parking at the downtown station. That explained the fancy new cars I'd seen in Margaret's driveway. The tunnel opens next month," Chris continued, "but you didn't hear it from me." After he left, I called Anthony with an update. His response surprised me. "Stop documenting. Stop fighting the small battles," he advised. "We're going nuclear." "What do you mean?" "They made one critical mistake," Anthony explained. "In their arrogance, they built on your property without securing the rights. Under state law, you own that tunnel section. We're filing for immediate ownership recognition." "Can we win?" I asked. "Not only can we win," Anthony said, "but we can shut down their entire operation. And here's the beautiful part. They know it. That's why they're trying to scare you away." That afternoon, I drove to the Dallas County Records Office and filed the paperwork Anthony had prepared. The clerk's eyes widened as she read through the documents. "This is unusual," she stammered. "Please ensure it's processed right away," I replied. "It's a time-sensitive matter." Walking back to my car, I felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. The HOA had resources, connections, and a willingness to play dirty. But now, I had something they desperately needed. My phone rang. Unknown number. "Is this about the tunnel?" Margaret's voice was ice cold. "How did you get this number?" I asked, though I already knew. The HOA had everyone's contact information. "You're making a grave mistake," she continued, ignoring my question. "We can make your life very difficult. More difficult than destroying your garden, sending security to harass you, or keeping you up all night with patrol cars." Silence. "I know about the diverted funds, Margaret. I know about your companies getting the contracts. I know everything." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "What do you want?" "I'll see you tomorrow at the HOA office, 10 a.m. sharp." I hung up before she could respond. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt in control. That night, sitting on my porch watching the stars, I heard the rumble beneath my feet. But this time, it didn't bother me. After all, that tunnel was now mine. Margaret wore a blood-red pantsuit to our meeting. Linda sat beside her, furiously taking notes. 3 other HOA board members, her loyal followers, filled the conference table. Their faces showed nothing but contempt. I brought Anthony and a court reporter. "This is highly irregular," Margaret began, eyeing the court reporter. "HOA mediation is a private matter." "I'm not here for mediation," I replied, sliding a folder across the table. "I'm here to inform you that my ownership claim of the tunnel segment beneath my property has been filed and recognized by the county." The board members exchanged nervous glances. "Furthermore," I continued, "I'll need $5 million for easement rights, retroactive permissions, and compensation for damages. Or I shut down all tunnel access through my property tomorrow." Margaret's face went pale beneath her makeup. "You want how much?" $5 million, non-negotiable." "This is extortion," Linda sputtered, snapping her pen in half. "No," Anthony interjected smoothly. "This is property law. My client owns that tunnel segment you built without permission on his land. The legal precedent is quite clear." Margaret composed herself quickly, her eyes narrowing. "We'll make your life hell," she said softly. "Assessment fees will triple for your property. Daily fines for every violation. We'll force you out of your home before you see a penny." I smiled and pointed to the court reporter. "Every threat is being recorded. And I've already spoken with the city inspector about the unpermitted construction under my home. He's very interested in how this project avoided municipal review." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "1 week," I said, standing up. "Then I'm sealing off access and filing criminal charges for the misappropriation of HOA funds." As Anthony and I walked toward the door, I heard Margaret hiss to Linda, "Find something on him. Everyone has secrets." Outside in the parking lot, Anthony looked uneasy. "They won't take this lying down. Margaret's connected with half the city council." "Let them try," I said, with more confidence than I felt. "The law's on our side." That afternoon, I returned home to find a crowd gathered on my street. A massive crane was hoisting equipment over my backyard fence. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded, pushing through onlookers. A worker in a hard hat approached. "Emergency utility repair. HOA approved it this morning." "On my property? Without my permission?" He shrugged. "Got all the paperwork right here, signed by the homeowner. The signature wasn't mine, not even close." I called the police. They arrived an hour later, by which time the workers had already dug a 6-foot hole in my yard, conveniently right above the tunnel access point, I discovered. "Civil matter," the officer said after glancing at the paperwork. "Take it up with your HOA."
Later that evening, a news van parked outside my house. A reporter approached with a microphone. "Sir, can you comment on allegations that you're holding your community hostage for financial gain?" My stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" She shoved a press release into my hands. The HOA claimed I was demanding millions to allow a community improvement project to continue. The story was already spinning out of control. Margaret had gotten to the media. That night, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Neighbors I'd known for years called to express their disappointment. Online, the neighborhood forum filled with angry posts about my greed and selfishness. Only Chris texted his support. "They're lying. Stay strong." By morning, someone had spray-painted "greedy" across my garage door. I called Anthony in a panic. "They're turning everyone against me." "Expected," he replied calmly, "but I've got something that might help. The city utility records show no emergency repairs scheduled for your street. That work crew yesterday, private contractors hired by Margaret's husband's company." "That changes nothing," I said. "People believe what they want to believe." "True, but this might change things." Anthony's voice had that excited edge again. "I dug into why this tunnel route is so important. Guess who's been quietly buying up commercial property at the planned exit points? Margaret and 3 city council members. They're planning to build a shopping complex at the main station. Property values will skyrocket once the tunnel opens." This was bigger than I thought, far bigger. That afternoon, as I scrubbed graffiti off my garage, a black SUV with tinted windows pulled into my driveway. A woman in an expensive suit stepped out. "Mr. Daniels from the Dallas Transit Authority would like to meet with you," she said, handing me a business card, "regarding your property situation." Why would the Transit Authority care about my HOA dispute? She smiled thinly. "Perhaps because that tunnel was built to precise municipal transit specifications, as if it was always intended to be part of the city network. Mr. Daniels can explain everything. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., his office." She handed me a folder. Inside were detailed plans for a city-wide transit expansion. The tunnel under my house formed a critical link between the north and south lines. I called Anthony immediately. "The Transit Authority wants to meet. This changes everything." "Exactly," he said, practically giddy. "Margaret wasn't just building a private neighborhood shuttle. She was constructing the first segment of a public transit system, without permits, without environmental studies." "And I own the missing piece they need," I finished. "Bingo," Anthony replied. That night, I slept soundly for the first time in weeks. The rumbling beneath my house no longer felt like an invasion. It felt like opportunity. Morning brought a surprise visitor. Margaret herself stood on my doorstep, her perfect composure finally cracking. "We need to talk," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "before you meet with Daniels." I let her in, curious what would make the mighty Margaret Collins come begging to my door. $6 million, she blurted without preamble. "Cash today. Sign the papers, and this all goes away." "Why the sudden generosity?" I asked. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "The timeline has accelerated. We need to resolve this quickly." "Because the Transit Authority is involved." Her head snapped up, shock plain on her face. "How did you?" "They contacted me. I'm meeting with them in an hour." Margaret's carefully constructed facade crumbled. "You don't understand. The city will offer you pennies compared to what I'm offering. They'll condemn your property through eminent domain if you refuse." "Maybe," I admitted, "but they'll also want to know why a private HOA was building public infrastructure without permits. Who authorized it? Where the money came from?" She shot to her feet.
"You're making a terrible mistake." As she stormed out, I called after her, "How much was the city going to pay you for that tunnel, Margaret? More than 6 million, I bet." The door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. An hour later, I sat across from Transit Director Daniels, a serious man with kind eyes. "Quite a situation you found yourself in," he said, reviewing my documents. "I'm curious, how did you discover the tunnel?" I explained about the vibrations, my investigation, everything that had led to this moment. Daniels nodded thoughtfully. "What you've uncovered is troubling. The Transit Authority has been planning this route for years. Land acquisition costs made it impossible until someone started quietly building exactly what we needed." "Margaret Collins," I supplied. "Yes. Mrs. Collins approached us 6 months ago with a proposal. She claimed she had secured rights to build a tunnel that could connect to our system for a substantial fee, of course. But she never had those rights." "She built under my property," I pointed out. Daniels leaned forward. "Which puts us in an interesting position. We need that tunnel segment, but we won't do business with someone who obtained it fraudulently." My heart raced. "What are you suggesting?"
The city was prepared to make me an offer for full ownership and transit rights to the tunnel segment beneath my property. Daniels wrote a number on a slip of paper and slid it across the desk. 8.7 million. "This connects our north and south lines," Daniels explained. "A critical link we've been trying to secure for years." I tried to keep my voice steady. "And Margaret?" Daniel's expression darkened. "We'll be conducting a full investigation into how this project proceeded without proper oversight. There will be consequences." As I left the Dallas Transit Authority building, contract in hand, my phone buzzed with a text from Anthony. "Emergency HOA meeting tonight. Margaret looks scared." For the first time since this nightmare began, I smiled. Couldn't wait to attend. I was brushing my teeth when my phone buzzed again, this time from Chris. "Emergency HOA meeting tonight. They're coming for you." My stomach dropped like a stone. The community center buzzed with whispers when I walked in. Faces turned away. Something was wrong. Margaret stood at the podium, a sweet smile plastered across her face. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice. We have evidence that changes our tunnel dispute completely." My jaw hit the floor when Chris, my neighbor, my supposed friend, walked to the front. "I need to set the record straight," he said, avoiding my eyes. 3 years ago, at the summer barbecue, we all discussed the tunnel project. I clearly remember him saying he was excited about it and giving his full permission." "That's a lie," I shouted, jumping to my feet. "We never had that conversation." Margaret's smile widened. "We have more proof." She clicked a remote, and suddenly my voice filled the room. "I don't care about property lines. Just build whatever you want. I'll sign anything." It was my voice, but I never said those words, at least not together. They had spliced recordings from different conversations. "This is edited," I protested, but murmurs spread through the crowd. Doubt had been planted. Then came the documents, papers with signatures that looked scarily like mine, supposedly giving away underground rights for a measly 500 years ago. "This is forging," I hissed to Anthony.
They're good fakes, he whispered back. We'll need a handwriting expert. When I got home, a bright orange notice was taped to my door. A brand new lock gleamed where mine had been. My key no longer worked. The notice read, "Emergency property seizure under HOA Bylaw 22.7. This property has been temporarily secured due to owner actions endangering community infrastructure. Hearing scheduled in 14 days. Contact Margaret Collins for temporary housing options." They had locked me out of my own home. I kicked the door in frustration, earning a quick response from a security guard stationed in a car across the street. "Sir, please step away from the property." That night, tossing on scratchy hotel sheets, I wondered how things had gone so wrong. Near midnight, my phone rang. "I've been digging," Anthony said, his voice urgent. "You need to see these blueprints." At midnight, I called in a favor at the city planning office. Anthony was right. The tunnel specs were identical to municipal transit standards, down to the millimeter. "That's weird," I muttered. "Why would a private HOA build to city specs?" "Because," Anthony said slowly, "I don't think this was ever meant to be just an HOA project. I found planning documents from 5 years ago. The city proposed this line, but cut it due to budget issues. The route is exactly where your tunnel sits." My mind raced. So Margaret knew the city would eventually want this route. And if she already had it built, Anthony finished, she could sell it for massive profit. Your land was the missing piece. A text from an unknown number lit up my phone. "Meet me at Riverbend Coffee, 7 a.m. I have proof. Come alone. C." Was Chris setting me up again? Or did he actually have something that could save me? With Margaret controlling my house and forged documents threatening my case, I had little choice but to find out. What I didn't know was that Margaret had already made moves to erase me from Oak Ridge Heights permanently, and she wasn't planning to use legal means. Steam rose from my coffee cup as I sat nervously at Riverbend Coffee. Every time the door jingled, I jumped. At 7:06 a.m., Chris slid into the seat across from me, eyes darting around nervously. "I don't have much time," he whispered, sliding a USB drive across the table. "Margaret threatened my family, said she'd make sure my daughter lost her college scholarship if I didn't help her." "Why are you helping me now?" I asked, suspicion sharp in my voice. "Because she's gone too far." He tapped the drive. "Look at this. Margaret's been planning this for years. She bought land around your property because geological surveys showed it was the perfect tunnel route. She's been working with her brother-in-law at City Hall." I plugged the drive into my laptop right there in the cafe. Emails, meeting minutes, bank transfers, a complete paper trail showing Margaret had diverted $3.4 million of HOA funds to build a tunnel she planned to sell to the city for $12 million. "This is huge," I whispered. "But why? Tell me now." Chris looked down. "Yesterday, I overheard Margaret and her ally talking about making your problem disappear permanently. They mentioned that accidents happen all the time in construction zones." A chill ran down my spine. "They're threatening my life." "Just be careful," Chris said, standing up. "I was never here." As he left, a black SUV crept past the coffee shop. Behind the wheel was Margaret herself. I called Anthony immediately. "We need to move fast. I've got everything." By noon, we sat across from Transit Director Daniels, who scanned the evidence with wide eyes. "This explains why the tunnel matches our specifications exactly," he said. "Margaret Collins has been trying to sell us on a private transit partnership for years. We turned her down because her asking price was absurd." "She doesn't own the tunnel," I said firmly. "Part of it runs under my property, which makes it legally mine." Director Daniels leaned forward. "Would you be willing to work directly with the city? We've needed this connection for years but could never afford the land." The next morning, Anthony and I walked into Dallas City Hall. 3 hours later, I walked out with a signed agreement. $8.7 million for ownership rights to the tunnel under my land. $1.3 million in damages plus immediate restoration of my home access. "One more thing," I told Daniels. "I want the full story made public." He nodded. "The city has a zero-tolerance policy for fraud. We'll cooperate fully with investigators." That evening, news vans crowded my street as I used my new key to step back into my home for the first time in days. Reporters shouted questions about the unfolding HOA tunnel scandal. The emergency HOA meeting the next night was packed. Margaret looked pale as I walked in with Anthony and 2 police officers. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded. I smiled. "The city has purchased the tunnel rights from me, the legal owner, and they're very interested in how HOA funds were misused to build it." "You have no proof," she snapped. "Actually," I said, nodding toward the back, where Chris stood with a detective, "we have everything, including recordings of you threatening my safety." The officer stepped forward, reading Margaret and her co-conspirator their rights as gasps filled the room. "This meeting," I announced, "is now about electing a new HOA board and creating bylaws that prevent this kind of corruption." 6 months later, I hosted a neighborhood barbecue in my backyard. Beneath us, the newly named Integrity Line hummed with trains connecting Oak Ridge Heights to downtown Dallas. My phone buzzed with a text from Anthony. "Just got word. Margaret and her partner took a plea deal, 7 years each, plus restitution to the HOA." I smiled, watching my neighbors laugh and mingle. Some had apologized for doubting me. Others had helped gather evidence once the truth came out. The new HOA president, Gloria, a retired judge, raised her glass. "To standing up for what's right, even when it feels impossible." As trains rumbled beneath our feet, I felt peace settle over me. I had kept my home despite sky-high offers. The $10 million sat in investments, funding a new legal aid program for homeowners fighting HOA abuse. Sometimes justice comes from unexpected places, like an illegal tunnel under your house. And sometimes the ground beneath your feet is worth more than you could ever imagine.